Welcome back to another deep dive into Fallout lore. Today, we are exploring one of the darkest and most unsettling possibilities in the Wasteland. What if survival was never about the vaults? What if the real winners of the Great War were already building empires while Americans stood in line for lottery numbers? Let me take you on a journey south of the border into territories the new California Republic has never mapped into a nightmare that makes Vault-Tech's experiments look like amateur hour. This is the confession of a ranger who crossed into Mexico and discovered an empire that inherited the earth. The lore begins now. My name used to be Marcus Rivera, but the rangers call me Ghost Walker now. I earned that name crossing into territories where nothing should survive, where automated defense systems track warm bodies for 30 miles in every direction, where the ground itself remembers coordinates from pre-war military satellites. I crossed those killing fields twice, and I am here to tell you something that will change everything the new California Republic thinks it knows about power, about survival, about who really won the Great War. While Vault-Tech sold middle-class Americans a fantasy of underground salvation, while they sealed families into experimental tombs disguised as shelters, something entirely different was happening south of the border. The Mexican cartels were not just drug smugglers in 2077. They were multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprises with infrastructure that rivaled legitimate governments, with resources that made Vault-Tech look like small-time operators. And they knew the bombs were coming. They did not guess. They did not hope to survive. They knew because they had bought that knowledge with blood money, bribes to Pentagon officials, intelligence purchased from Chinese spies, corruption so deep in government contractor networks that they had exact specifications for every doomsday bunker being constructed on American soil. I need you to understand something fundamental about power before the Great War. The cartels controlled supply chains that stretched from Colombia to Canada, manufacturing operations that produced everything from pharmaceuticals to weapons, financial networks that laundered money through legitimate banks in every major city. When the resource wars began, when nations started fighting over every barrel of oil and every ton of uranium, the cartels simply adjusted their business model. They had always understood that governments are temporary, that borders are lines drawn by whoever holds the most guns, that survival belongs to whoever prepares best. So while Americans stood in line for Vault-Tech lottery numbers, while they paid life savings for spots in experiments designed to study human suffering, the cartel leadership was building something real. Deep in the Sierra Madre Mountains of northwestern Mexico, they constructed hardened bunker complexes that made government installations look primitive. In the Copper Canyon system, a series of gorges 4 times larger than the Grand Canyon, they built fortified cities and natural fortresses that bombs could never reach. Beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, they carved networks through limestone bedrock, creating underground facilities with fusion reactors, hydroponic farms, water purification systems that could run for centuries. They called it Operation Continuidad. Continuity, not survival, not hope. Continuity, because they never planned to just survive. They planned to continue ruling, continue expanding, continue building empire when everyone else was dying in radioactive ash. I have seen their planning documents recovered from a courier who did not survive the Mojave heat. Budgets that totaled in the hundreds of billions, timelines stretching back to 2065, 12 years before the bombs fell. Architectural specifications for bunkers that could house 10,000 people each, complete with schools, hospitals, manufacturing facilities, armories stocked with pre-war military equipment. They had been smuggling for decades. On October 23, 2077, when the air raid sirens wailed across America and Chinese missiles screamed through the upper atmosphere, the cartel leadership was not panicking. They were not praying. They were sealing blast doors on facilities they had tested and retested for 5 years. Their families retreated into climate-controlled safety while American families huddled in basements with canned food and desperate prayers. Their engineers monitored radiation sensors while Vault Tech residents discovered too late that their vaults were laboratories, their lives were experiments, their salvation was a corporate lie. I crossed the border 9 months ago, following rumors that most rangers dismissed as wasteland mythology. Traders told stories of a city with working streetlights, of hospitals that performed surgery with pre-war medical equipment, of schools where children learned from actual textbooks instead of scavenged knowledge. My commanding officer laughed when I requested permission to investigate. She told me I was chasing ghosts, that Mexico was nothing but radioactive ruins and raider tribes, that the Great War had hit Mexico City almost as hard as Washington. She was wrong about everything except my new nickname. The border zone is not empty wasteland. It is a killing ground more sophisticated than anything the Brotherhood of Steel ever designed. I encountered my first automated defense turret 30 miles north of what used to be Monterrey. Laser weapons mounted on tracked platforms, power sources that had been running for 200 years, targeting systems that locked onto my body heat before I even saw the installation. I survived because I was carrying credentials I had taken from a dead Enclave officer, someone who had been trading with whoever ran these systems, someone who never made it back to report what they found. Those credentials saved my life 14 times in the first week. Every 50 miles, another checkpoint, not manned outposts, but automated systems that scanned the credentials, verified them against some database that still existed somewhere, and allowed me to pass. Minefield patterns that updated every 12 hours, surveillance drones using power cells I had never seen before, sensor nets that could track individual heartbeats in a 100-square-mile radius. This was not wasteland scavenger technology. This was pre-war military infrastructure maintained and improved for 2 centuries. The first settlement I encountered was not a settlement. It was a complex. Reinforced concrete walls 30 feet high, guard towers with weapon systems that made NCR outposts look like children's forts, gates operated by hydraulics that hummed with fusion power. The guards wore combat armor that rivaled Brotherhood power armor, but lighter, faster, powered by fusion cores with markings I had never encountered. They carried weapons that looked like they had rolled off an assembly line the day before, not weapons scavenged from 200-year-old armories. And they spoke English with perfect pre-war accents, not the wasteland pidgin that marks survivors who learned language from half-literate parents. They brought me to someone they called El Arquitecto, the architect. He received me in an office that could have been transplanted from before the war, with electric lights powered by working reactors, with computers running operating systems that still functioned, with furniture that had never seen radioactive dust or raider damage. He offered me coffee, real coffee from beans grown in hydroponic facilities beneath the complex. He offered me a seat in a chair that had been manufactured, not scavenged. And then he explained the truth that American governments spent decades trying to hide. The Mexican cartels in 2077 were not criminal organizations in any traditional sense. They were shadow governments with budgets larger than most countries, with organizational structures more sophisticated than legitimate states, with resources that let them build infrastructure invisible to official oversight. While the United States government poured money into Vault Tech's experimental horror show, the cartels spent $1 trillion building real survival infrastructure. Not experiments, not tests, not gambles on untried technology, just solid engineering, proven systems, and absolute commitment to continuity of power. El Arquitecto showed me surveillance footage from the Great War, cartel observation posts in the mountains, watching the northern horizon erupt in nuclear fire. They tracked every warhead, calculated fallout patterns in real time, predicted radiation zones with computer models they had stolen from American military contractors. When the first bombs hit Mexico City, they were already sealing their facilities. By the time, The thermal pulse reached the Sierra Madre. Their blast doors were closed. Their air filtration was running. Their reactors were powering life support for populations that would emerge 50 years later, not as desperate survivors, but as organized nation-states. Those 50 years made all the difference. While Americans fought over water and bullets, while the Brotherhood hoarded technology they barely understood, while the NCR struggled to rebuild government from scattered survivors, the cartels maintained discipline. They kept their hierarchies. They preserved their knowledge. They ran schools teaching pre-war engineering, medicine, agriculture, tactics. They manufactured new equipment in underground factories that never stopped running. They built a civilization that never fell, just went underground and waited for the surface to stop burning. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I am about to tell you next will make you question everything the NCR has taught you about who controls the wasteland and what really happened in the 200 years since the bombs fell. They call their nation La Federación del Sur, the Southern Federation. It stretches from northern Mexico to Panama, a continuous territory larger than the entire New California Republic, governed by what used to be 6 separate cartel organizations that merged into a single federated government when there was no longer anyone to criminalize them. Think about that for a moment. The NCR claims to be rebuilding civilization, but La Federación never lost it. They just transformed it, evolved it, refined it into something more efficient than any democracy could manage in the wasteland. El Arquitecto spent 3 days showing me their territories, not on old maps, but on satellite surveillance feeds. Yes, you heard that correctly. They have satellites, not pre-war relics struggling in decaying orbits, but maintained systems they have been servicing through ground stations they kept operational for 2 centuries. I watched live feeds of their cities, of Monterrey with skyscrapers that use fusion power, of Guadalajara with hydroponic farms producing enough food to feed 3 million people, of Tijuana with weapons factories manufacturing pre-war quality arms at pre-war production rates. The scale is difficult to comprehend if you have only seen NCR settlements or Brotherhood bunkers. Imagine a city where every building has electricity 24 hours a day, where water flows from taps connected to purification systems that turn seawater into drinking water, where hospitals have X-ray machines and surgical equipment and pharmaceuticals manufactured in laboratories, not scavenged from ancient clinics, where schools teach children from printed textbooks, not from memories of knowledge that fades a little more with each generation. I saw their industrial districts, and I need you to understand what this means. The NCR celebrates when they get a factory producing ammunition again. The Brotherhood hoards technology they can barely maintain. La Federación has assembly lines that never stopped running. They manufacture weapons, not by hand tooling scavenged parts, but actual manufacturing with quality control and standardized components. I saw rifles rolling off production lines as each one identical to the next, each one tested and certified before leaving the factory. I saw plasma weapons using designs that suggest they have been innovating beyond pre-war technology, improving on weapons that were cutting edge in 2077. Their supply chains are the real miracle, the thing that proves they never actually lost civilization. They still mine copper from the Copper Canyon, silver from Zacatecas, rare earth elements from deposits they have been working for 200 years. They still smelt ore in foundries powered by fusion reactors. They still manufacture everything from steel beams to computer chips in facilities that Americans think disappeared with the old world. Every link in the chain from raw material to finished product remains intact, maintained by people trained by people who learned these skills before the bombs fell. El Arquitecto explained their educational system, and this is where you see the true genius of their continuity plan. They did not just preserve knowledge in books, they preserved the people who held that knowledge. The original cartel leadership who entered the bunkers in 2077 included engineers, doctors, scientists, professors, every skilled professional they could recruit or kidnap in the decade before the war. Those experts trained the next generation, who trained the generation after that, in schools that never closed, with curricula that never degraded into wasteland improvisation. I met a woman who was a fifth-generation fusion reactor engineer. Her great-great-grandmother had maintained the reactors when the bunkers first sealed. Her great-grandmother had improved the designs during the 50-year isolation period. Her grandmother had overseen the construction of new reactors when they emerged and began expanding. Her mother had taught engineering at their technical university. She herself was currently designing seventh-generation fusion systems with efficiency ratings that exceed anything built before the war. 5 generations of unbroken knowledge transfer, each building on the last, each improving on what came before. Their military capabilities are what kept me awake at night after I saw them. The NCR field soldiers with service rifles and leather armor. The Brotherhood has power armor but limited numbers. La Federación has both quantity and quality that make northern factions look like tribal militias. I watched a training exercise involving 5,000 soldiers, all equipped with combat armor that their factories produce at a rate of 500 suits per month. Their weapons are not scavenged relics. They are newly manufactured assault rifles with modular components, sniper rifles with quantum computing scopes, energy weapons that use miniaturized fusion cells they developed themselves. They have reverse-engineered Brotherhood power armor from suits they captured during what El Arquitecto called intelligence-gathering operations. That is their polite term for the fact that they have been sending operatives north for decades, studying NCR tactics, analyzing Brotherhood technology, mapping every settlement and military installation from Baja to Oregon. Every high-quality weapon cache that NCR Rangers find in the Mojave, La Federación planted them there. Every one. They were not gifts. They were tests, measuring response times, analyzing military organization, evaluating combat effectiveness, gathering data for invasion planning, because they are planning to invade, not next month, not next year, but the invasion is coming, and it has been planned with the same methodical patience that let them survive the Great War. El Arquitecto showed me the timeline. In 20 years, when their population reaches 15 million and their military reaches full mobilization capacity, they will expand north. Not through conquest, he emphasized, through economic integration. They will offer clean water to drought-stricken NCR settlements. They will sell electricity to communities burning Brahmin dung for heat. They will provide manufactured goods that make NCR craftsmanship look primitive. They will offer medicine that actually cures diseases instead of just treating symptoms. Within a generation, he predicted, half the NCR will depend on Federation trade for survival. And once you depend on someone for water, for food, for medicine, for the tools you use and the weapons you carry, you are not really independent anymore. You are a client state. You are controlled through economic strings more powerful than any military occupation. The NCR will wake up one day and realize they are a province of La Federación, and it will have happened so gradually, so peacefully, that they will barely notice the transition. But the peaceful integration is Plan A. They have backups. I saw their military staging areas near the border, not temporary camps, but permanent bases with hardened fortifications, artillery that can strike targets 100 miles away, armored vehicles using diesel engines, and fuel refineries. They have kept operational for 2 centuries. They have air power. Yes, aircraft. Not pre-war relics held together with hope and scavenged parts, but maintained planes with jet engines and avionics that work. They showed me reconnaissance footage shot from aircraft cruising at 30,000 feet, showing NCR positions with clarity that made me realize how vulnerable every northern settlement is to anyone with this level of technology. Their intelligence network is everywhere. El Arquitecto introduced me to 3 traders had personally encountered in NCR territory people I thought were Wasteland merchants selling salvage. They were Federation intelligence officers gathering economic data, mapping infrastructure, building relationships that would activate when the expansion begins. He showed me files on NCR generals, complete with personality assessments, tactical preferences, political loyalties, personal weaknesses. They know more about NCR military leadership than most NCR soldiers. They have been tracking the Brotherhood for longer. Every technology raid the Brotherhood conducts in California has been observed, analyzed, logged into databases that predict Brotherhood patrol patterns, response protocols, tactical doctrines. El Arquitecto showed me simulations of Brotherhood Federation engagements that his military analyst had run, testing different scenarios, different weapons, different approaches. In 92% of simulations, Federation forces won decisively, usually within 72 hours of first contact. The Brotherhood's technological advantage disappears when facing an opponent who manufactures technology instead of hoarding it. I asked about the Enclave. El Arquitecto smiled, which was somehow more frightening than if he had shown concern. The Enclave, he explained, had been in contact with La Federación since 2240. They shared certain strategic interests, certain views about who deserved to inherit the wasteland. There had been technology sharing, intelligence sharing, coordination that neither organization publicized. When the Enclave fell to the Brotherhood and NCR, Federation observers learned valuable lessons about overconfidence and premature expansion. They would not make the same mistakes. The most disturbing revelation came on my fourth day in the complex. El Arquitecto took me to their research division, and I need you to understand that when I say research, I mean active scientific development, not just maintenance of pre-war knowledge. They have been innovating. Their weapons division showed me plasma rifles with power cells that last 3 times longer than pre-war models. Their medical research team has developed radiation treatments that actually reverse genetic damage, not just slow it down. Their agricultural scientists have engineered crop strains that grow in irradiated soil and concentrate nutrients instead of toxins. They showed me their version of the Pip-Boy, which they call the Coyote unit, wrist-mounted computers with enhanced mapping, encrypted communication across their entire network, biometric weapons locks that prevent anyone outside Federation military from using captured equipment. Every soldier, every officer, every citizen above age 12 wears one. It is their identification, their communication device, their access key to every system in their society. And it is networked. Every Coyote unit connects to central databases, sharing information in real time, creating a collective intelligence system that makes their military coordination terrifying efficient. I spent a week in Monterrey, walking streets that could have been from before the war, if not for the lack of advertisements and the prevalence of armed guards. People spoke Spanish primarily, but English was common, especially among the educated classes. There were restaurants serving food I had not imagined still existed, theaters showing films made by their entertainment industry, universities where students studied engineering and medicine and history. It was civilization, real civilization, not the desperate reconstruction that NCR calls progress. But it was also a police state, though they never called it that. Every corner had surveillance, every transaction was recorded, every citizen's location was tracked through their Coyote unit. Dissent was not tolerated. I saw what happened to someone who criticized the government too loudly in a market square. Security arrived within 90 seconds, and the person disappeared into custody while everyone else pretended nothing had happened. El Arquitecto later explained that social order was paramount, that individual freedoms were subordinate to collective survival, that the Federation's strength came from unity and discipline that could not tolerate disruption. Their society is organized around the old cartel hierarchies, transformed into something resembling corporate government. Each of the original 6 cartels became a department, managing different aspects of Federation governance. One handles military affairs, Another manages production and manufacturing. A third controls agriculture and food distribution. The fourth runs intelligence and internal security. The fifth oversees education and cultural affairs. The sixth manages external relations and trade. At the top is a council of 6 directors, descendants of the original cartel leadership who entered the bunkers in 2077. It is stable, efficient, productive, and utterly ruthless. I saw their justice system in action, trials that lasted minutes, sentences executed immediately, criminals processed through a system that values order over mercy. I saw their approach to outsiders, which ranged from exploitation to elimination depending on perceived usefulness. I saw their treatment of indigenous populations in their territory, people absorbed into the Federation as laborers with few rights and fewer opportunities for advancement. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores, because what I am about to tell you next is why I am recording this, why I am risking everything to make sure someone in NCR territory knows the truth about what is coming from the South. El Arquitecto let me see all of this for a reason. He let me walk their streets, tour their facilities, meet their people, examine their weapons, study their systems. And on my 7th day in Monterey, he explained why. The Federation wants the NCR to know they exist. They want the Brotherhood to understand what is coming. They want every faction north of the border to have time to make a choice because the expansion is inevitable, and El Arquitecto believes that informed surrender is preferable to ignorant resistance. He sat across from me in that pre-war office and laid out the Federation's proposition. The NCR can integrate peacefully, maintaining local governance under Federation oversight, gaining access to technology and resources that will transform their territories from struggling frontier settlements into prosperous provinces. Or, the NCR can resist and be conquered by a military force they cannot match, absorbed by economic pressure they cannot counter, undermined by intelligence networks they cannot detect. Either way, in 20 years, the new California Republic will be part of La Federación del Sur. The only variable is how many people die during the transition. The Brotherhood faces a simpler calculation. They can surrender their technology hordes and accept positions as researchers and engineers within the Federation's military-industrial complex, using their expertise to actually advance human knowledge instead of hoarding it like dragons guarding treasure. Or they can fight and be systematically eliminated by opponents who manufacture the same technology the Brotherhood scavenges, who innovate while the Brotherhood stagnates, who understand that technology is worthless if you are too afraid to use it or share it. Smaller factions will be given similar choices: integrate or be absorbed, cooperate or be conquered, trade peacefully or be economically strangled. The Federation has planned for every scenario, wargamed every possibility, prepared contingencies for responses they have not even seen yet. This is what 200 years of uninterrupted planning looks like. What happens when an organization never loses institutional memory, never forgets its strategic objectives, never stops working toward long-term goals? I asked El Arquitecto the obvious question: why tell me? Why let an NCR ranger see all of this and then allow me to leave? His answer chilled me more than anything else I had witnessed. Because the Federation believes in informed decision-making. Because they want the NCR to understand exactly what they are facing when trade delegations arrive in 5 years offering deals that seem too good to be true. Because they want Brotherhood leadership to be thinking about the futility of resistance when Federation representatives approach them with employment contracts and technology sharing agreements. Because fear of the unknown is less predictable than fear of the known. He told me I had 48 hours to reach NCR territory before they deployed tracker teams to ensure I did not deviate from my assigned route, did not stop to gather more intelligence, did not do anything. except deliver the message they wanted delivered. He gave me supplies, a vehicle with enough fuel to reach the border, and a transponder that would identify me to the automated defense systems as an authorized traveler. He smiled when he handed me that transponder and told me that if I tried to disable it or leave it behind, the border defenses would treat me as a hostile target. So, I drove north, through checkpoints that opened automatically when they scanned my transponder, past sensor networks that tracked my every movement, across minefields that remained dormant as long as I stayed on the prescribed route. I thought about destroying the transponder anyway, about trying to evade the surveillance, about heading east or west instead of north. But every few miles, I saw evidence of what happened to people who tested the border defenses. Scorch marks where laser turrets had fired, blast craters where mines had detonated, skeletal remains in power armor, Brotherhood paladins who had tried to penetrate south and never made it home. I crossed into NCR territory exactly 47 hours after leaving Monterey. The transponder deactivated itself the moment I crossed the border, which meant they could track exactly where that border was, down to the meter, which meant their intelligence on NCR territorial claims was perfect. I ditched the vehicle 5 miles into NCR territory and walked to the nearest ranger outpost, where I filed a report that my commanding officer immediately classified and probably buried. Because here's what I learned in the weeks after I returned. The NCR already knows about La Federación. Not everything, not the full extent of their capabilities, but enough to be terrified. Trade delegations from the South have been making contact for 3 years, offering deals that NCR economists cannot explain, selling manufactured goods at prices that should be impossible, providing technology that NCR scientists cannot reverse engineer. The NCR Senate has been debating how to respond, whether to accept Federation trade offers or try to maintain independence, whether to prepare for war or hope for peaceful coexistence. The Brotherhood knows too. Elder Maxon received a Federation delegation in 2278, representatives who demonstrated weapon systems that made Brotherhood equipment look obsolete, who offered technology sharing agreements in exchange for Brotherhood cooperation with future Federation governance. Maxon refused, ordered the delegation killed, and lost an entire Paladin squad in the resulting firefight. The Brotherhood has been trying to gather intelligence on the Federation ever since, sending scouts south who mostly disappear, launching raids that encounter defenses they cannot penetrate. So, the major factions know, but they are not telling their people. The NCR does not want citizens panicking about an invasion they cannot prevent. The Brotherhood does not want to admit they found an opponent whose technology surpasses their own. Everyone is pretending the Federation does not exist, hoping the problem will somehow resolve itself, praying that the invasion timeline is wrong or that something will change in 20 years. But I have seen their cities, I have met their engineers, I have watched their factories produce weapons and armor at rates the NCR cannot imagine. I have studied their plans, and I believe they will succeed. Not because they are better people, not because their cause is just, but because they never stopped being civilized, never lost the knowledge and infrastructure that makes civilization possible, never had to rebuild from scratch what they maintained through unbroken continuity. And I need you to think about what this means for survival in the Wasteland. The NCR represents democracy, freedom, individual rights, all the values we claim to have inherited from pre-war America. But the NCR struggles to feed its people, cannot provide basic medical care to most citizens, fields a military that fights with 200-year-old weapons. La Federación represents authoritarian efficiency, collective discipline, ruthless order that prioritizes stability over freedom. But the Federation has solved the material problems of wasteland survival, has achieved a standard of living that most NCR citizens would consider miraculous. So, which is better, freedom with poverty or prosperity with oppression? Democracy with scarcity or dictatorship with abundance? Individual rights in a struggling frontier or collective security in a functional state? I do not have an answer. I just know that in 20 years, people across the NCR will be making that choice, whether they realize it or not, whether they want to or not. There is something else I need to tell you, something El Arquitecto revealed on my last night in Monterrey. The Federation has been in contact with other survivor groups across the world. They have established radio communication with settlements in South America, in Australia, in parts of Africa, and Asia that survived the nuclear exchange. They have been coordinating, sharing knowledge, building a global network of post-war civilizations that are all further along the recovery path than anything in North America. The world did not end in 2077. It just reorganized itself while America was tearing itself apart. In Asia, they showed me footage of cities rebuilt around pre-war infrastructure, of populations in the hundreds of millions who survived in bunkers similar to the Federation's, who emerged and reclaimed their territories while Americans fought over water and bullets. In Europe, they showed me evidence of nation-states that maintained continuity through the war, that preserved their governments and cultures and technologies, that are now manufacturing goods and developing weapons and preparing for whatever comes next. The implication is staggering. North America is not the center of the post-war world. It is a backwater, a radioactive wasteland populated by primitives who lost everything and are slowly, painfully trying to rebuild a fraction of what they lost. The real powers in the post-war world are the nations that never fell, that went underground and waited, that maintained their civilizations through the fire. And now those powers are looking north, seeing weakness and chaos, and calculating when to expand. Think about what happens when you have spent your whole life believing your struggle matters, that rebuilding the NCR or preserving Brotherhood technology or expanding Caesar's Legion or whatever faction you support represents humanity's future. And then you discover that in other parts of the world, people are living in cities with electricity and running water, manufacturing new technology, running schools and hospitals and governments that actually function. Your entire worldview collapses. Your struggle becomes meaningless. You realize you are fighting over scraps while others are baking fresh bread. That is what El Arquitecto wanted me to understand. That is the message he sent me back to deliver. The NCR is not rebuilding civilization. It is playing at civilization while real civilizations watch and wait and plan. The Brotherhood is not preserving humanity's technological heritage. It is hoarding antiques while others innovate and manufacture and advance. Every faction in North America is delusional, thinking they matter on a global scale, when really, they are just warlords fighting over a particularly radioactive piece of wasteland. I have been asking myself every day since I returned whether I should have stayed in Monterrey, whether I should have accepted the offer El Arquitecto made me on my last night to join the Federation, to use my skills as a ranger in their intelligence service, to be part of a civilization that actually works instead of struggling with a frontier that constantly threatens to collapse. He told me the offer would remain open, that when the expansion begins, people with knowledge of NCR territory will be valuable, that I could secure a good position for myself if I acted before the window closed. Part of me wishes I had accepted. Part of me wants to go back, to cross that border again, to live in a city with electricity and clean water and food that does not taste like radiation. But another part of me cannot abandon the people I have sworn to protect, even if protecting them is ultimately futile, even if their best hope for survival is surrender to an empire they do not know exists. So, I am recording this in a bunker 5 miles north of the border, using a radio transmitter I salvaged from pre-war wreckage, broadcasting on frequencies I hope someone will hear. I am putting this information out into the wasteland because people deserve to know what is coming. They deserve to understand that the world is bigger than their corner of it, that powers exist they never imagined, that choices are approaching they are not prepared to make. If you are listening to this in NCR territory, start asking questions about the trade delegations from the South. Ask why manufactured goods are suddenly appearing in markets at prices that make no economic sense. Ask where the high-quality weapons are coming from, the ones that work too well to be wasteland salvage. Ask your leaders what they know about La Federación del Sur and why they are not telling you. If you are in the Brotherhood, ask your elders about the delegation in 2278. Ask about the scouts who went south and never returned. Ask about the weapon systems they encountered that surpassed anything in Brotherhood arsenals. Ask why they are hoarding technology instead of using it to secure your future. If you are in independent settlements, start preparing for the moment when traders arrive offering deals that seem too good to refuse. Understand that those deals come with strings, with dependencies, with loss of autonomy that happens so gradually you will not notice until it is too late. Understand that your choice is not whether to join the Federation, but how you will join it, on what terms, with what degree of autonomy remaining. What would you do if you were in my position? If you had seen what I have seen, learned what I have learned, understood what I now understand about the future that is coming, whether we want it or not? Would you try to warn people who probably will not believe you? Would you accept the inevitable and try to secure the best position possible? Would you fight knowing the fight cannot be won? I genuinely do not know the right answer, and I am the one living this nightmare. Here is what I have learned in the months since my return, what I have pieced together from classified documents I should not have access to, from conversations with officers who drink too much and talk too freely, from intelligence reports that confirm everything El Arquitecto told me. The Federation's timeline is accelerating. 20 years has become 15. 15 might become 10 because they are watching the NCR tear itself apart over Hoover Dam, watching the Brotherhood lose ground to scavengers and raiders, watching every major faction in North America demonstrate exactly how unstable and vulnerable they truly are. The NCR is already dependent on Federation trade, though they do not call it that in official reports. Those miracle water purification systems that appeared in Shady Sands 3 years ago, Federation technology sold through intermediaries, now essential to keeping the capital alive during drought seasons. Those medical supplies that saved thousands during the new plague outbreak in 2279. Federation pharmaceuticals distributed through traders who hid the origin. The NCR Senate debates independence while drinking water filtered through Federation equipment, while treating soldiers with Federation medicine, while their economy becomes increasingly tied to Southern trade networks. The Brotherhood is worse off. They lost 40% of their fighting strength in the war against the Enclave, and they never recovered. Their recruitment cannot keep pace with attrition. Their technology advantage erodes every year as other factions reverse engineer their equipment or develop alternatives. And now, they face an opponent who manufactures power armor instead of scavenging it, who innovates energy weapons instead of hoarding them, who treats technology as a tool for expansion rather than treasure to guard. Elder Maxon knows the Brotherhood cannot win a war against the Federation. He is trying to prevent that war through isolation, through avoiding contact, through pretending the threat does not exist. But isolation is not a strategy when your opponent controls the choke points. The Federation has been quietly acquiring territory along the Colorado River, establishing settlements that they claim are independent, but that everyone knows are Federation client states. They control water access, they control trade routes, they control the flow of goods and information through corridors that the NCR thought they governed. In 5 years, maybe less, they will control enough strategic positions that the NCR will be economically surrounded, dependent on Federation goodwill for survival, unable to resist integration even if they wanted to. I met with an NCR senator 2 weeks ago, someone I cannot name because they would be arrested for what they told me. The Senate has been receiving detailed proposals from Federation trade representatives, offers to build infrastructure in NCR territory in exchange for territorial concessions and trade agreements, power plants that would bring electricity to every NCR settlement, water systems that would end drought vulnerability forever, medical facilities that would reduce infant mortality by 80%, schools that would educate NCR children to pre-war standards, all free, all provided by the Federation as gestures of goodwill between neighbors, all contingent on agreements that slowly transfer sovereignty south. Some senators want to accept. They see their constituents suffering from preventable diseases, living without electricity, drinking contaminated water, and they want to give those people the civilization the Federation is offering. Other senators see the trap, understand that accepting makes the NCR into a dependency, transforms independence into illusion while Federation influence becomes reality. But even the skeptical senators admit they have no alternative to offer. The NCR cannot build this infrastructure on its own. It lacks the knowledge, the resources, the institutional capacity. So the choice is accept Federation help or watch citizens continue suffering from problems that have solutions sitting in warehouses in Monterrey. That senator asked me what I would recommend. I had no answer, because both choices lead to the same destination. Accept Federation help and become dependent. Refuse Federation help and fall further behind until your people demand you accept. Either way, the Federation wins. Either way, the NCR becomes a client state. The only question is timing. I have started seeing Federation agents everywhere now that I know what to look for. That trader in the hub selling pre-war quality tools, Federation intelligence mapping economic networks. That doctor in Vault City offering miracle treatments for radiation sickness, Federation operative building relationships with influential families. That engineer helping repair the Hoover Dam generators, Federation specialist, ensuring NCR infrastructure becomes dependent on Southern expertise. They are everywhere, and they have been for years, and nobody noticed because we did not know what we were looking at. The worst part is that most people will welcome the Federation when it comes. They will see clean water and electricity and medicine and schools, and they will not care about sovereignty or independence or political theory. They will care that their children are not dying from diseases that have cures, that they are not living in darkness and filth, that they have opportunities their parents never imagined. The Federation understands this. They are not planning to conquer hearts and minds. They are planning to buy them with material improvements that make abstract concepts like freedom seem less important than concrete realities like survival. I have been reading pre-war history, trying to understand if anything like this has happened before, and I found parallels everywhere. Rome expanding through client states and economic integration before military conquest. European empires building infrastructure in colonies to create dependency, superpowers during the Cold War using economic aid to build spheres of influence. The Federation is not inventing new strategies. They are applying proven historical models that worked for thousands of years, adapted for post-apocalyptic conditions. But there is one difference that makes the Federation's approach even more effective. In pre-war history, conquered peoples could appeal to shared humanity, to international law, to global opinion. In the post-war wasteland, there is no higher authority. There is no international community. There is no moral framework beyond survival. The Federation can do whatever it wants, and the only check on their power is military resistance from factions that cannot match their capabilities. So what do? I have been asking myself this question every day for months, and I have not found an answer that does not end with Federation victory. Military resistance is suicide. The NCR and Brotherhood combined could not match Federation forces, and they will never combine because they hate each other almost as much as they should fear the Federation. Economic resistance is impossible when your people are suffering and someone is offering solutions. Cultural resistance might preserve something of who we are, but culture does not stop armies or economic integration. Maybe the answer is to shape the terms of surrender, to negotiate the best possible deal while we still have something to negotiate with, before we are completely dependent and have lost all leverage. Maybe we should be sending delegations south, opening communications, trying to establish relationships that might preserve some autonomy in the future that is coming, whether we resist or not. Maybe informed surrender is actually the wisest choice, the option that saves the most lives and preserves the most of what we value. But I cannot bring myself to recommend that. Because even if it is the rational choice, even if it saves lives and reduces suffering, it feels like betrayal. The NCR represents something beyond material success. It represents the idea that people can govern themselves, that democracy matters, that individual freedom is worth defending even when authoritarianism is more efficient. Surrendering those principles because the alternative is harder, is bloodier, is more expensive, feels like admitting that values only matter when they are convenient. Yet, I have seen what the Federation offers. I have walked streets where children are educated, where sick people receive treatment, where electricity and clean water are universal. I have met people living better lives than anyone in NCR territory can imagine, and I cannot honestly tell them their system is wrong when it produces results that our system cannot match. I cannot say democracy is better when democratic NCR citizens are dying of preventable diseases while authoritarian Federation citizens are healthy and prosperous. This is the choice that is coming for everyone in the wasteland. Principles or prosperity, freedom or function, democracy that struggles or authoritarianism that succeeds, and I genuinely do not know which is the right answer. I just know that pretending the choice does not exist is the worst possible response, that ignoring the Federation will not make it go away, that we need to be having these conversations now before circumstances force decisions we are not prepared to make. El Arquitecto told me something on my last night in Monterrey that I have been thinking about constantly. He said the Great War did not end civilization. It ended certain forms of civilization. It ended governments that depended on complexity and technology and global trade networks. It ended democracies that required educated populaces and stable institutions. It ended systems that could not adapt to radical discontinuity. But other forms of civilization survived, forms based on hierarchy and discipline and centralized control, forms that could maintain continuity through catastrophe. He said the wasteland is not a blank slate where humanity can rebuild whatever it wants. It is a harsh environment that selects for certain forms of organization and against others. Democracy is expensive. It requires resources for education, for communication, for institutional overhead. Authoritarianism is efficient. It concentrates resources, makes decisions quickly, enforces compliance without debate. In the wasteland, efficiency is survival, and that is why the Federation thrived while the NCR struggles, why authoritarian organizations survived while democratic ones collapsed. I do not know if he is right. Part of me wants to believe that democracy can succeed even in harsh conditions, that freedom is not a luxury but a necessity, that people will fight to preserve self-governance even when the fight is costly. But another part of me looks at the evidence and sees patterns I cannot ignore. Every successful post-war faction has strong central authority. Every struggling faction debates and argues and fragments. The NCR is powerful because it is more authoritarian than it admits. The Brotherhood survives through rigid hierarchy. Caesar's legion conquers through absolute control. And the Federation dominates through perfected authoritarianism maintained for 2 centuries. Maybe democracy was only possible in the old world because abundance made inefficiency affordable. Maybe freedom was a luxury product of industrial civilization that cannot survive in a resource-scarce wasteland. Maybe the future belongs to hierarchies and dictatorships, not because they are morally superior, but because they are structurally adapted to post-apocalyptic conditions. These are thoughts I hate having, ideas I wish I could dismiss, but the evidence keeps supporting them. I am recording this final section from a different location than where I started. I have been moving every few days because I believe the Federation is tracking me. Nothing obvious, nothing I can prove, but too many coincidences. Traders appearing at isolated outposts where I stop. Questions from strangers that feel too specific. Movement in the darkness that disappears when I investigate. They want to know what I am doing with the information they gave me, whether I am following their script or deviating into something they did not plan for. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video. My name is Marcus Rivera, Ranger Ghost Walker, and in a few hours I am going to do something incredibly stupid or incredibly necessary. I am not sure which. I am going back across the border, not to Monterrey, not to Federation territory I have seen, but east to regions they did not show me, to areas their controlled tour avoided, because El Arquitecto was too careful, too precise, too rehearsed. Everything I saw was what they wanted me to see, which means there are things they did not want me to see. Information they are hiding, weaknesses they are concealing behind the display of strength. Maybe I will find something that changes the equation, some vulnerability the Federation has not accounted for, some weakness that gives the NCR a chance. Maybe I will just get myself killed by automated defenses or human guards. Maybe I will disappear and become another missing ranger, another person who went south and never came back. But I have to know. I have to understand what they are hiding before I can decide whether to recommend resistance or surrender. Before I can advise people on choices that will determine the future of every human settlement in North America. If you are hearing this recording, I did not make it back. Someone found the dead drop where I left these recordings in a bunker whose location I have shared with 3 people I trust. They were instructed to recover it if I do not return within 30 days. So, if you are hearing this, I have been gone for at least a month, which probably means I am dead or captured. Which probably means you will never learn what I found in Federation territory they did not want me to see. But you know what they did want you to see. You know the Federation exists, that it is powerful beyond NCR comprehension, that it is coming north, whether you are ready or not. You know the timeline, the strategy, the overwhelming advantages they bring to any confrontation. You know the choice that is approaching. Integrate peacefully or be absorbed violently, surrender gradually or resist futilely. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you try to warn people who might not believe you? Will you prepare for the integration that seems inevitable? Will you look for weaknesses that might not exist? Will you accept the future that is coming or rage against it knowing rage accomplishes nothing? I do not have answers anymore. I just have questions and evidence and the growing certainty that everything we thought we knew about the post-war world was incomplete at best and wrong at worst. The Federation wants you to know one final thing, the message El Arquitecto emphasized repeatedly. Tell them the South remembers. Tell them we remember when America tried to control us, when they called us criminals while building empires on our labor, when they invaded our land for oil and resources and treated us like colonies instead of neighbors. Tell them we survived when they could not. Tell them we are coming north, not for conquest, but for justice, not to destroy, but to rebuild, not as enemies, but as the civilization that endured while theirs collapsed. That is their narrative. That is the story they will tell when the integration begins, when trade becomes dependency, becomes absorption, becomes empire. They will frame it as liberation, as bringing civilization to the wasteland, as correcting historical injustices and restoring order to chaos. And millions of people will believe them, will welcome them, will celebrate the end of struggle and the beginning of prosperity, even if that prosperity comes with chains. I do not know if those chains are heavier than the chains of ignorance and poverty and constant survival struggle that define wasteland existence. I do not know if freedom matters when you are free to starve and die of preventable diseases. I do not know if democracy is worth defending when autocracy delivers better outcomes for more people. I just know that these questions matter, that the answers will shape the future for centuries, and that we are running out of time to figure them out before circumstances make the decisions for us. This is Ghostwalker, signing off, maybe for the last time, maybe just until I find what I am looking for. Either way, you know what is coming. You know what the Federation offers and what it will cost. You know the choice approaching and the stakes involved. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Choose wisely, choose carefully, and remember that choosing to ignore the situation is still a choice, just the worst possible one. The South is coming. Be ready.